Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Excited to be here. We're going to be talking about all things NIST, and a little bonus for you as well. There's a lot happening in the NIST environment, and it can be overwhelming with all the different frameworks and things like that. So we want to show you how to operationalize all this great information that NIST puts out. The one thing that I really appreciate about NIST is they make all of this available at no cost. So they have a lot of excellent resources, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll have some actionable takeaways so that you can go out and apply what you've learned. We'll be talking about, of course, the shifting NIST landscape and then shifting into something called digital trust and trying to understand exactly what that is and what that means. And then we'll talk about how you can train your staff and, as part of the preparations side, making sure that you can actually operationalize digital trust and prepare for that. And then talk about some tools to assess your progress in that digital trust journey, and then we'll shift into a Q&A. And so, like I said, there's been a lot of changes happening in the NIST landscape. We have the NIST security controls update cadence. And so what's interesting about this is for the longest time, NIST has been releasing PDF documents, and there's been a lot of, very large PDF documents, and they would release updates to those maybe every few years. And now they have an online tool that will, allow you to actually increase the updates. They'll be more frequent, but smaller. And then we'll talk about 800-171, the revision 3, and then dive into the AI risk management framework, understand exactly what that is and how that can help you. And then we'll be talking about NIST CSF 2.0. So like I was saying, NIST, historically, they've released these large PDFs, and every few years, some updates would come out, but it would take them a while to get through that. And so now they've shifted to something, they're still releasing the PDFs, but I was actually attending a NIST launch event for NIST CSF 2.0 yesterday. And one of the things they were really excited about was this cybersecurity and privacy reference tool. And I've heard it from NIST CSF folks. I've heard it from the NIST 800-171 folks. They're both very excited about this tool because it'll allow them to keep up with evolving threats much easier. And they'll also be making available, different things in different data formats. So here's a screenshot of the tool. If we were to scroll down, this is a screenshot, but if we were to scroll down, you would actually see the security controls on that page. And so you can see that this says 5.1.1. That's a reference to 853.5 revision 5, but they made a small patch update, which included just a number of changes to security controls. So this is their mechanism to keep up with the threats that are coming out so that they can update their security control catalogs for 853, 800-171. And then also, I know the NIST CSF folks are excited because they can keep up with the changes that are happening in the informative references side that are external to them. So, this is something to be aware of and know. Next, we'll dive in real quickly to 800-171 and talk a little bit about what that is. 800-171 is a special publication that documents the security controls required to protect controlled and classified information on non-federal systems. In other words, CUI that is stored on a government contractor system. The focus is on the confidentiality of CUI. And if we think about other standards out there like GDPR, the data in scope is privacy data. For PCI DSS, the in scope data is payment processing information. Well, in 800-171's case, CUI is the regulated data. If CUI touches a system, then 800.171 must be applied to the system to protect the confidentiality of CUI. I had the opportunity to speak with the lead author of NIST 800.171, Dr. Ron Ross, on my podcast last year about a number of topics, including NIST 800.171 Revision 3. And he had some amazing things to say. He just didn't know so much history. I have 3 episodes out there. Definitely recommend checking those out if you'd like to. NIST is scheduled to release the 3rd revision of NIST 800.171 in April or May of this year. Here's a few interesting changes. The number of security controls decreased from 110 to 95. However, this lower number is not really an accurate representation. There are actually more requirements in the text of the security controls. So even though there are less security controls as far as the total number, there are actually more requirements to account for. 800.171 R3 also includes 44 organizational defined parameters. These are variables within a security controls text that can be defined by a government agency or a defense contractor. And that's a question that's kind of up in the air right now. If you have a security control, for example, system inactivity locks, you walk away from your system, should it lock within 15 minutes? Should it lock within 10? Should it lock within 5? Right now, that's a variable in the text, and we don't really know who is going to be actually populating those. So that's something that's interesting. We can go back to the Toy Story meme here. A very interesting security control that NIST added into Revision 3 is 3.14.8. Information management and data retention. And I think a lot of companies keep information really indefinitely, especially a lot of small businesses. This control will require them to eventually remove the CUI from their systems. And, so that pile of sensitive information that you have will have to go away, in accordance with laws and regulations and all that good stuff. So that's something that will be coming down the pike. Next, we'll talk about CMMC, just as a quick bonus. And this is a DoD program. It's called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or better known as CMMC. CMMC is focused on providing the DoD with increased assurance that its defense contractors are properly securing DoD's controlled and classified information. And guess what standard that ties back to? For the most part, NIST 800.171. The bulk of CMMC maps back to 800.171. Another level ties back to another NIST publication called NIST 800.172. The DoD, and here's the quick story, the quick synopsis. The DoD tried to get contractors to implement NIST 800.171, and they even said, please, but the companies out there, they were not adopting 800.171, and eventually DoD realized that they couldn't trust companies to self-attest that they're compliant, and that approach just didn't work. So in comes CMMC with a threat of third-party independent cybersecurity assessments. CMMC 1.0 was initially released in early 2020, and in December of last year, the CMMC 2.0 program proposed rule was finally released, which was a huge milestone. A lot of people thought that CMMC was going away. Is it staying? Is it leaving? We don't know. But now that rule came out, finally, we are seeing the progress that has been happening under the hood at DoD. It has 3 levels, and the level that's required will depend on the type of information the contract involves and the criticality of that contract. Level 1 is required for contracts that only handle federal contract information. It has 15 security controls. Level 2 is required for contracts that handle CUI, controlled and classified information, and has 110 security controls. Level 2 requires that scary third-party assessment that everybody else in the ISO world and they're used to it, but for us it's new. So give us a little bit of grace, I suppose. It's going to be required for most level 2 contracts. Level 3 is required for DoD's most critical contracts that involve CUI, and it has 24 enhanced security requirements from NIST 800.172, which is meant to address nation-state advanced persistent threats. Nearly every DoD contract will have CMMC requirements that specify a CMMC level the contractor must have to be awarded a contract. And again, you'll notice that nearly all of these levels map back to NIST special publications. So there's a lot happening, especially in the DoD space. When I spoke to Dr. Ron Ross, he mentioned the term weaponizing NIST special publications and putting contractual clauses saying you have to implement this NIST special publication, whether it's 800-171, 800-172, so that's all very interesting. We can move on to the next slide. And now we'll jump into the NIST AI RMF. The purpose of this document is to offer a resource to the organization designing, developing, deploying, or using AI systems to help manage the many risks of AI and promote trustworthy and responsible development and use of AI systems. So, I mean, it would cover everyone from the people who are designing, developing, deploying, or even just using. So this is applicable to a wide range of organizations. You'll notice that the NIST AI RMF is very similar to the NIST CSF, which we'll discuss in a moment. The framework core has 4 functions, 19 categories, and 72 subcategories. The functions are high-level groupings, which include govern, map, measure, and manage. Govern is a cross-cutting function that is infused throughout AI risk management and enables the other functions of the process. The map function establishes the context to frame risks related to an AI system. The measure function employs quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method tools, techniques, and methodologies to analyze, assess, benchmark, and monitor AI risk and related impacts. So a lot of words. We're just measuring how these things are operating, what the outputs are, and making sure they're working as expected. The manage function entails allocating risk resources to mapped and measured risks on a regular basis and as defined by the govern function. Now, we also have profiles. They're tailored guidance of AI RMF guidance for specific setting or use case, whether for a specific sector, workflow, or task. And then you have playbooks, and their outcomes in the framework core. Playbooks are meant to be community driven by suggestions and feedback. And that's one thing also I really appreciate about NIST. They really listen to the community. And one of the things NIST mentioned in the NIST CSF launch event yesterday, the 2.0 launch event, was that they wanted to be able to take almost every word in their document and trace it back to a comment from the community. And also it was interesting too, because they said that in previous workshops, they've had representation from, I believe, 100 different countries. So awesome to see NIST working not only in the US, but international as well. We can go to the next slide where we'll talk about AI risk mitigation. And really, what we're looking to do when it comes to an AI system is to minimize harms to people, to organizations, to ecosystems. So we have, and it's interesting because I'll give you in a military context. There was an interesting demo from a platform out there, and they were showing how a AI system, an LLM like ChatGPT, could be used in a military context where you have planning and operations. What's the time to this target using this weapon system? And what is available in the arena? What are my options? That's that's a lot of trust you're putting in an AI system. Now, that's a military context. There's all kinds of different ways that these systems could be used. So really minimizing the harm to those 3 groups is exactly what we're trying to do here. We can move on to the next slide. And we have here the RMF life cycle. And this is from an organization, and it's called the Economic Cooperation and Development Organization. And so we'll just quickly walk through this. The inner circle show AI systems, key dimensions, and the outer circle shows AI lifecycle stages. Starting with the application context in yellow, in the plan and design stage, we document the system concepts, objectives, and requirements. And again, this is a life cycle, right? And it starts from the development of a AI system. Moving to data and input in light blue. In the collect and process data stage, we gather, validate, and clean data while considering legal and ethical considerations. And I know that in the United States, they're talking about how we're going to regulate AI, and I'm sure that other countries are already ahead of us. So, there's going to be legal as well as ethical considerations that we alluded to in the previous slide when it comes to the data that we're collecting and making sure, obviously, that data is accurate, that it'll produce the outputs that we're looking for. Moving to the AI model in green, we build the model by creating or selecting algorithms and then verify, validate, and calibrate the model's output. And so, most of us are probably familiar with the algorithms as far as that goes. It's probably GPT 3, 3.5, 4, something like that. There's multitude of algorithms out there, but you have to select one and then make sure, again, that the output is exactly what you're hoping it will do. Moving on to task and output in dark blue. In deploy and use, we pilot or test, verify regulatory compliance, manage changes, and evaluate the user's experience. And again, that tie back to the regulatory compliance, because that is going to be extremely important as we proceed with these tools. Moving back to the application context in yellow, we operate and monitor the AI system continuously to ensure it is meeting its objectives and its output meets regulatory requirements and, again, ethical considerations. And finally, moving to people and planet in the center in gray, we want to mitigate any negative impacts of the AI system. We can move to the next slide. And in this slide, we're really looking about what outcomes do we want to achieve. And this has close alignments to NIST CSF as well. Really, we want to ensure that our AI system is secure and resilient, but also that it is valid and reliable, that it's consistently producing quality outputs. Because there's a lot that happens to get to the outputs phase where it actually provides information. There's a lot that goes into getting to those outputs. So making sure that everything is explainable, interpretable, and as well as privacy enhanced and accountable and transparent. So these are the types of outcomes that the AI RMF will help us achieve. And then we'll shift into NIST CSF 2.0 for a quick overview. The NIST cybersecurity framework outlines cybersecurity outcomes that help an organization reduce its cybersecurity risk. The framework is designed to be used by organizations of all sizes and sectors and has been adopted throughout the United States and internationally as well, as I mentioned previously. The NIST CSF was first released. When it was first released, it was focused on critical infrastructure, but they quickly realized that it could be adopted by all kinds of different organizations. So it's great to see the widespread adoption. And we can move to the previous slide, I'm sorry. NIST CSF does not prescribe how cyber outcomes should be achieved, but instead maps to resources that provide additional guidance on practices and controls that can be used to achieve those outcomes. And that's really important because many companies have already made security investments and applied security controls. NIST CSF is complementary to the existing security controls that you've already implemented. And then we can go to the next slide showing the timeline. NIST CSF 1.1 is the current version on the street and was released in 2018. The CSF version 2.0 update effort began in early 2022. and was actually released yesterday. So check it out. And as I mentioned before, I was able to attend a launch event in Washington, D.C. with NIST and other industry leaders. And I'm hoping to have them on my podcast to talk more about the details and go back in history, go back in the time machine and learn from them. So keep an eye out for that. We can go to the next slide, talk about the NIST CSF core. And the NIST CSF core is divided into 3 parts. And we'll quickly run through it in a moment. We can go to the next slide. First, we have the framework core, which houses the cybersecurity outcomes, which are grouped by functions, categories, and subcategories. And to give you an example, and we'll have it on the screen in a moment. If you go left, one left. Just go back to the previous slide. Perfect, thank you. NIST CSF 2.0 has 6 functions, 22 categories, and 106 subcategories. And you'll see the functions and categories on the screen. The framework core also includes notional examples of how those outcomes might be achieved, and it also includes references to additional guidance on how to achieve those outcomes. These are called informative references, and that could be anything from external security standards such as CIS, NIST 853, ISO 27001, and the informative references could also be sector-based, such as critical infrastructure and other areas. And I know that this is one thing in the NIST CSF 2.0 world that was just released yesterday that they'll be working on, and the community is going to be collaborating to, kind of migrate those informative references to the new NIST CSF version. The second part of NIST CSF is profiles and tiers. Profiles capture the organization's current or target cybersecurity posture, and tiers measure the maturity of an organization's cybersecurity program. The most significant change in NIST CSF 2.0 is the addition of a new function dedicated to governance. This change elevates governance from a category within the identify function, and you'll see the identify function right there. Now it's its own standalone function. And one of the things that NIST highlighted, their entire goal, one of their major goals, right, with NIST CSF was elevating cybersecurity from the server room to the boardroom. And governance is a key part that will help us do that. There's also more of an emphasis on cybersecurity supply chain risk management. They actually added a new category in the govern function focused on cybersecurity supply chain risk management. And that's a whole nother area that could be a whole nother talk in itself, the supply chain risk. Governance, when it comes down to it, even though it's the boring policy process stuff, it actually is very important because you have to have that stuff in place, the policies and procedures, because humans are involved and we're not automated systems. So the policies and processes help us to make sure that we do everything correctly. We can go to the next slide, please. Another thing that I really appreciate about NIST and the NIST CSF 2.0 launch is that they've provided quick start guides for various sectors, as well as implementation examples for each subcategory. There's a ton of small businesses out there, and these guides and examples will help them understand how to successfully adopt and implement NIST CSF. And NIST CSF 2.0 is available now, so check it out. I'll hand it off to you, Rick. Go ahead.
All right, next slide, please. Seeing a little bit of a delay on my end, just still on the NIST CSF.
Is it still late?
I got it now. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. Just to follow up on Jacob, great job, Jacob. I appreciate all that great information. Just to further elaborate on the value of NIST as an organization, I've been working with NIST for a long time now, almost 10 years now. And they are they provide absolutely great publications with all the detail you need for the things that you need to do within your organization, to protect your data and to protect your organizational resiliency. I'm really happy that the update process is more frequent now, and probably because the threat is more frequent. So that's a really good thing. And I think last but not least, but the announcement yesterday on this new tool is an absolute, amazing addition to the NIST portfolio, because it allows you to get to the information quicker, or better yet, get to the answer quicker in terms of what you need to do to protect your organization. And at the end of the day, we're in a situation now where it's not if you want to do it, it's the fact that you have to do it, and you have to do it now, because you're being held accountable. Organizations are being held accountable. Those who run the organizations are being held accountable, and those who support the leadership of those organizations being held accountable. So people, this has created a sense of urgency that I think is really, really important. But let's talk about digital trust and why it's important. Because all these controls and all of these publications and all of these other capabilities that Jacob mentioned on his portion of the webinar, why are we doing them? What goal are we actually trying to achieve? And what we're trying to do is establish a digital trust partnership, not only with our clients and our stakeholders, but also our supply chain partners, whether they be cloud providers, MSPs, and so on and so forth. We really have to have an environment that enables trust, because, especially with the advent of AI that Jacob covered extremely well, you start to question everything you see. You don't know what to believe anymore. So it's really important to have, an environment that is built around trust, and that those who, work with you or utilize the services that you provide, feel that what you're delivering is trustable. In other words, it has integrity and confidence. It's tied to some really strong security, resilience, and privacy policies and programs. And at the end of the day, it has high quality and reliability. I mean, those are all fundamental things to digital business. But I think, people have kind of ignored the security aspects, or at least really looked at them from a, kind of a bolt-on type thing versus a strategic business capability. And that's the shift that organizations have gone through in order to establish, digital trust with their clients. Digital trust is really important to the business. And if you think about it, it is required to be competitive in the marketplace. As soon as the trust is broken, as soon as you experience a breach and confidential information is stolen that impacts organizations and people's lives, the trust relationship breaks down, and they no longer become a customer of what you're offering. So it has a dramatic impact to the business. And so businesses not only need to view this in terms of building that digital trust relationship, but view it as a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And that's where leadership needs to get their head around this and really start to make those investments to improve the organization's ability to establish that trust and continually innovate that trust with their clients, right? Clearly, it's all about consumer confidence. I mean, you can't turn anywhere these days, whether it's to your TV set or to your computer or your phone, where you're not being exposed to another major breach. They are happening daily, and there are multiples happening. And now with the new SEC rules, organizations are on the hook to report them almost immediately. So we're going to be hearing a lot more breaches than we did in the past based on these new rule changes. And last but not least, it's about your reputation. Do you care about your customers? Do you care about that relationship, that digital relationship you have with them? And so once again, this is all, falls under the umbrella of establishing digital trust. And digital trust is a concept that has been heavily promoted by the World Economic Forum. So this applies to every country, every company on the planet Earth. It's also been reinforced through organizations like ISACA, which has created a digital trust enterprise framework that allows you to learn how to think about digital trust as an organization, and then adapt the capabilities to support that, which I'll talk a little bit more in my presentation. Next slide, please. Seems to be a little bit of a delay.
Is it good now?
Nope, I still got the same screen up. My apologies. Okay, so there it is. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why the NIST cybersecurity framework is central to digital trust. All right, and this just really builds on what Jacob said earlier. The NIST cybersecurity framework provides a standardized approach for managing digital risk. Now, I've been in this business for over 4 decades, as was described when they introduced me, and I've seen a lot of change happen over those years. And so, digital risk has always been something that people were thinking about and were preparing for, at least at some level. But most of it was done with, homegrown techniques or some of the techniques developed by some of the high-end consulting firms. But there was no standardization to it, all right? And with that being the case, and as the problem got progressively worse, the government became concerned that, especially in the critical infrastructure, that this would become a problem. And that's why they commissioned NIST to build the NIST cybersecurity framework. So this executive order was issued in 2014, and NIST came out with the first release of the NIST CSF in 2015. What's core about the NIST CSF is it previously identified the 5 core functions that a business needs to have in place to manage risk: the ability to identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover. What they did with Release 2 is finally added the secret sauce, and something that we've been petitioning this for a while to put into the framework, and that is governance. Because you can't, build a program unless you have a set of rules that you need to follow in order, that's the outcomes that you want to achieve. And the governance piece establishes the rules, the boundaries that the organization wants to operate within when it comes to managing digital risk. So that's a really, really good a good capability that has been missing from the NIST framework. Super excited about the release of 2.0. Jacob mentioned this earlier, but I want to stress this, that the NIST framework was designed to be applied to any size organization, regardless of size, scale, or complexity. One of the biggest challenges that organizations face today is that, the digital environment is a complex system. And it's becoming more and more complex every day as more and more devices are added to the infrastructure, which increases the threat landscape, the attack surface. And so, having something that is a standardized approach where the 2-person company to the 200,000 person company can adopt and adapt the capabilities, a standardized approach to doing this. It gives them the capabilities they need to deliver the outcomes that they're responsible for. It also gives the government a way to measure how well we are doing as a country to not only protect our critical infrastructure, but to protect our economy by protecting our businesses. So that framework has become central to, not only helping organizations manage their risk, but also establish that digital trust relationship, whether it be with constituents or customers. Okay. The other thing is it works with the security controls and systems you already have in place. So NIST really did this the correct way, and that is not forcing you to do a forklift upgrade, but to work with what you have. In fact, in the NIST framework, they tell you, because people always go, well, where do I start? Well, you start where you are, all right? And the way you start where you are is to assess where you are. And so you can understand how your environment is set up. You can understand how your ecosystem is configured. You can understand dependencies. Who am I dependent upon to deliver the services that I'm responsible for, and who's dependent upon me? That's a really critical piece to this puzzle. The only other thing I'll say about this in terms of NIST CSF and digital trust, it's all about culture, right? That's one of the biggest risk that organizations face, because let's face it, culture is how work gets done within businesses, right? The culture defines who you are, what you do, how you do it, what are the boundaries and things like that. When we look at risk in digital business, right, the culture needs to be reformulated or recrafted to ensure that everyone in the organization understands what digital really is. So some of us think it's magic. I plug my computer into a wall and I can talk to anybody in the world. I can go do anything I want to do. but they don't realize all the steps that go behind it. I'm not talking about the technology steps. I'm talking about the people steps that are necessary to ensure that those services are delivered securely with a high degree of quality and reliability. So it's really important for organizations to assess their environment, know where they are, because you can only start where you are. And then once you understand where you are, you figure out where you want to go, and you develop a roadmap on how to get there. And it's not, it's not a forklift upgrade where you got to come in and do it all at once. You take incremental steps to, first of all, stabilize your environment, to ensure that you've got in place the minimum level of controls to protect your business. And then you can adopt additional controls to further extend what I call the defensible perimeter of your business. And then you can provide a way to continually innovate those controls based upon changes in the threat landscape, whether that be internal threats to your business, which is happening more frequently these days, external threats, or the threat landscape in general. Next slide, please. Well, let's talk about how to get your organization ready. I think this slide is a build slide. If you can just keep going. All right, super. One of the key things is to get your people what we call digital business risk awareness trained. All right, so that everyone's on the same page. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where you train your employees on how digital systems work. It's a relatively straightforward approach to, a basic understanding of digital business is really what it comes down to. You also need to help employees understand the risk associated with digital systems. So, you think about it. I mean, employees connect all sorts of things to your network that you may or may not know about. And those devices could have risk on them that, could be applications that were downloaded that weren't vetted by Google or Apple or something else, but they're introducing new risks to the business all the time. So you've got to train your employees on, not only what not to click on, but what also not to do in terms of adding additional risk to the overall portfolio. You need to also train them on the fact that, this is core and mission critical to the business success and to their success, right? Because if an organization becomes compromised, it just doesn't impact, the C-level suite and the organization as a whole. It impacts everybody in the business, because if a business is compromised and starts losing its customers, then guess what? Your job is in jeopardy because of that. So you really need to be thinking about this, what's in it for all of us, and what is my role? Talk about these dependencies I mentioned earlier in helping an organization, manage those risks. And you really got to spend a lot of time reinforcing or measuring the new culture, the new capabilities that people have. Because, sometimes, as things go on, things change. And sometimes those changes can have a negative impact on the business. So you want to be able to have in place the measurement systems that that continually allow you to measure the culture and measure the capabilities that the organization is delivering, and then making the updates that are necessary to, keep the organization on track or get it back on track if it falls off track. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about assess and how organizations would complete the assessment process. Well, I'm a huge fan of tools. In fact, I mentioned it earlier when I talked about the announcement from NIST yesterday on a tool to get to the sort through the publications quicker, and more importantly, get to that answer quickly. Okay. So tools are essential to helping you begin the process and all these journeys that have been covered in this webinar so far, with the first being a cultural assessment. All right. It's really important to understand how your organization works and the culture that supports that work from a people, practice, technology, organizational structures, and management point of view. When I say management, I'm talking about leadership and day-to-day management, people who manage the environment, who manage teams of people to deliver some aspect of the business and the capabilities associated with that. It's really important to understand, what management thinks the culture is and what the culture actually is. All right. And then once you understand that, once again, culture is another risk to the business, you can then put in place programs and capabilities to allow the organization to transition into this new culture of creating, protecting, and delivering the organization's digital business value. A lot of people have kind of stayed away from culture because culture is a really difficult thing to assess as well as to change. But without that change taking place, I don't care how much money you throw at technology or how much money you throw at other aspects of the business, you're still not going to achieve your outcomes. So it's really important to understand your culture. The second thing is skills. And this is something that has been kind of a pet peeve of mine for a while because, when I started in this business a long time ago, the organizations that I work for spent a lot of time and money continually developing my skill sets so that I could deliver more value to the customers or to whatever the areas that I was responsible for. And that's kind of shifted a little bit in the marketplace. A lot of times organizations are relying on people to do that themselves. But then again, if the organization doesn't have a strategy on skills development, even if you're responsible for it individually, you really don't know what to do. You really don't know what new skills you need. So organizations need to also do a skills assessment or a skills inventory of everyone in the business. That's not only important in terms of their current job roles and the capabilities they need to perform those roles, but it's also really important because you might identify some diamonds in the rough. In other words, people are working in a business role that have a really good analytical mind, and they would be really good working in the risk management group or in the legal group or some other group. So it allows you to really understand, what you have today and how does that align with the skills you need to support your digital business and the risk associated with that business. So it's really about, having that inventory. The other thing it does is when times get tough due to economic changes and organizations need to downsize a little bit, they can make those decisions not based on how much you make, but, how much you know, right? And it's important for organizations to make sure that they maintain that skills level they need to remain secure. And that also includes succession planning. A lot of organizations don't do that. And believe it or not, in the critical infrastructure, there are segments of the critical infrastructure market that apologies for that. Should have turned off my phone. Can cause a really big impact where if one person has all the knowledge in their mind and they're getting ready to retire, the organization then has a huge gap in skills that it hasn't planned for. So succession planning is really, really good. The third area of assessments are to assess your security controls. All right. Jacob covered, NIST 800-171, and the new AI risk management framework. You really need to, once again, build your strategy and determine, what your governance policies are, what level of risk are you willing to assume. And then you can go to the NIST publications, whether it be 171 if you're a defense industrial-based contractor, or NIST 853, which is really the Bible of security and privacy controls, and pick out the things that are, unique to your business or valuable to your business and to achieving, the security end state that your governance policies call out. Next slide, please. All right. Well, I guess we'll shift over to the Q&A session at this point.
Yes. I have seen a lot of questions come in. Maybe we'll limit it to maybe one or two for now, considering the time, and we can take it forward. I'm just going to pull out one question real quick. I think this question came all the way from LinkedIn, and the question is, how difficult do you think the transition from CSF version 2 from version 1 would be along with the new governance layer? Don't see a lot of resources around it. Jacob, would you be able to pick this up?
Yeah, sure. So there's been some shifting within the NIST CSF core. I think we went from a small number of changes as far as the numbers out there. As far as a direct mapping from NIST CSF 1.1 to 2.0, I think we'll probably have to get back with you on that. I know that one of the things NIST is working on is making NIST CSF 2.0 much easier to adopt, right? And I, in the chat, I linked to a article, a blog that they released with all the different references that are available today, which may help with that. But I know for one example, I do know is that I don't believe NIST 853 is listed as an informative reference yet for NIST CSF 2.0. There was a gentleman I was supposed to meet yesterday in the launch event. He said, yeah, I'll be there too. But I said, I wasn't able to connect with you. He said, well, I was sweating bullets in the back because the mapping to 853 is not there yet. So, that I know that's going to be a focus NIST has in the near term. So keep an eye out for updates is what I would say.
If just to add to that, since I've been involved since 2015 with organizations who have adopted the NIST framework, I'm not sure it's going to be that difficult or that much of an uplift for them. A lot of organizations, have started with the fundamentals, do their assessment, and then adopt the controls to stabilize their environment. And so they were just really looking to take care of this bleeding patient, their business, and getting it under control. I think a lot of them are now beginning to look at the next phase of the adoption of the NIST framework and putting in place more controls to expand the defensible perimeter. So the delivery of governance in the 2.0 is really important because you can't go to the second phase unless you have a governance model. You can do phase one without even having governance because it's just basically cyber hygiene. Okay. But when you go to expanding the number of controls, it really needs to be tied back to a set of strategic policies that the organization is operating under. So I think it couldn't be more perfectly timed. And I actually think, as Jacob mentioned earlier, we're going to see a dramatic uptick in the adoption of the framework versus what we've seen over the last 9 years. When we first started on this journey, you could do these webinars and people would attend, but a lot of people wouldn't take action because there wasn't a compelling reason to do so. As the problem got progressively worse, people started to pay more close attention and start to work towards adopting the framework. And then as the rules changed, the regulations, the government said, now you're going to be held responsible. Well, that clearly got people's attention. And then now you see the number of disclosures, increased number of disclosures that are going on. So this 2.0 release couldn't be more perfectly timed. And I don't think the upgrade from 1.1 to 2.0 is going to be that dramatic where it's going to slow things down.
Awesome. So I think for further questions, the audience can reach out to you guys. We've been linking your LinkedIn's directly on the chat. So feel free to reach out to Jacob and Hill. They'll be happy to take up any questions that you have. Just had one final thing that I've been saving up towards the end. This is an extremely happy announcement that I wanted to make, that we have collaborated with GRC Academy, and all the attendees and registrants for this session have a surprise for you. 30% off on all the CMMC ISO courses that Jacob has to offer. Just you can use the code Sprinto30 and redeem it. Jacob, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, we're just not seeing that slide, but yes, very happy to offer this out to folks if you're in the defense contracting area, world, or that type of thing. Also have NIST CSF training from the DVMS Institute, which is Rick's organization. So take a look. If you think it can help you, definitely reach out. Let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. It was wonderful having you guys today. Amazing session, amazing energy. There's a lot of insights. Again, to the audience, we will be sharing the recording and the slide deck to you right after this session. Feel free to check your inbox. Reach out to us if you want to check Sprinto out. As always, Sprinto helps you breeze through your compliances. Be it NIST, ISO, we are happy to help. So thank you guys for joining in today, and see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.